Good morning to our members in Germany and Denmark, and thank you for tuning in this morning. I hope you have a good cup of coffee in front of you, wherever you are. I am at our studio in Copenhagen, and I'm joined by Martin Kruse, who is a futurist at the Copenhagen Institute of Futures Studies. Martin is an energy expert and the person behind a recent study on the future of hydrogen. Green hydrogen is the stuff climate protection shall be made of in the future. The sector is minuscule, and it is therefore hard to see how important it will get in 20 or 30 years' time. But Martin has had a go at that and has conducted a Delphi study. We will start our session today by explaining what that is. Moreover, we have agreed on talking about the potential role of green hydrogen in decarbonization, the international market for green hydrogen in 20 years' time, transport and storage of hydrogen in the future, and the question as to when green hydrogen will become competitive and have a great influence on climate protection. Welcome to our studio.
Thank you,
Martin Kruse. Let's start by explaining just briefly what a Delphi study is.
Well, a Delphi study is a way to ask a lot of questions in a complex field to a group of experts, where you try to elicit a consensus on the questions that are being asked, so they can go in and see each other's responses, and so by doing that, they can they can see the reasoning behind why people have answered the way they do, and they can say, okay, I actually agree with him, rather than disagree. I actually think that his reasoning is correct, or her reasoning is correct. So they kind of build a consensus from that.
Okay, how many experts do you ask in such a study?
Well, in this study we had 56 international experts.
So from various countries, various parts
from all over the world.
Okay, so we got that. So what could be the role of green hydrogen in decarbonization? Why is it so important?
Well, it's the reason why hydrogen is considered one of the having a key role in decarbonization is the fact that if you look at the EU strategy of decarbonizing by 2050, we can decarbonize by electrification, energy efficiency, and increasing the amount of renewable energy. That's kind of the bulk of decarbonizing. But the last 20% is hard to decarbonize. So that's typically, blast furnace, steel production. It's heavy industry. It's heavy transport, shipping, and so forth. It's hard to electrify. So this is where hydrogen comes into play, because hydrogen has the same property, as you could say, as petrol. It's have a high energy intensity or density. So very few fuels have the same energy content that petrol has, which is why petrol is such a great asset. So we need something which is similar, and this is where hydrogen comes into play.
And hydrogen has that density.
Yeah, it's like 3 times as energy intensive as gasoline.
So even a better carrier of energy.
Yeah,
but just hard to make.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's a better carrier of energy. But I mean, this is also the reason why I think for a long time, people have been somewhat hesitant about hydrogen, because there's this catastrophe from Hindenburg, that people are reminded of when we think about hydrogen, because hydrogen is actually, if you look at the Hindenburg disaster that people may know of, this great disaster where you see, see pictures where a balloon just goes up in fire and it doesn't look pretty. It was actually meant to be helium, but because of export restrictions, they put in hydrogen.
Okay.
And hydrogen is extremely flammable.
Yeah.
So you don't want to mess with hydrogen. You really want technology to be safe. And this is some of the problems that we still have with hydrogen.
Okay. Before we get to the agreed questions or topics, I'd like to add that, of course, our participants can ask questions using the chat function here in Zoom. Please just make use of that. And the first topic we were going to talk about was the international market for green hydrogen in 20 years' time. What are the experts saying on that?
Well, we presented them with 3 different scenarios. One scenario, which was a scenario where we basically frame this as a hype. Hydrogen is something which is presently is being hyped, and it will disappear just as it did back into the 2000s. And back in 2002, the European Union was out saying we will have 5 million cars on the road by 2020. Now we're at 0.03% of that. Bush was out saying, "Oh, we have a lot of hydrogen cars," and that's not happening. So the first scenario kind of goes, this is a hype again. The second scenario goes to, yes, this will have a huge impact on the 20%. So it will have an impact on heavy duty transport, shipping, fertilizer, and so forth. And the third scenario is it will seep into even more areas like light duty vehicles. And the majority of experts focused on or thought that it would be the second scenario. So it wouldn't be all encompassing in every cracking corner of the economy, but it would be something that would have a huge impact on decarbonizing the last 20% in those areas where it makes sense from a financial point of view.
So the experts are saying this will be a success.
Yeah.
The introduction of green hydrogen and propagation.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that there's a prerequisite for this, which is that if we have a carbon tax, yes, then experts believe that hydrogen will be competitive, and it's something we will make use of. If there is no carbon tax, it's different. So it really depends on how can we, because hydrogen is still too costly. So we need to somehow create a market, create market incentives. And there's different ways we can do that. We can do that by mandatory having, like we did with biofuels, that we say we need a certain amount of biofuels in the gasoline mix. We can do that with hydrogen as well. But we can also do that simply by having taxing the competitive technology, so to speak. So gasoline and
as far as carbon tax is concerned, there is carbon tax in Europe, but not in other parts of the world. I think your study was conducted in spring. Is that correct? How do you see the development since spring then? Has it become more likely that we get this carbon tax world on a global scale?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, what has happened since then is one, that Chinese has opened the biggest carbon market in the world. So that's really positive. It's bigger than the EU market. The second thing is that the EU are focusing on having a import tax so a border tax on carbon. So, but this is very focused on certain areas like steel and other areas. So, yeah, we are definitely seeing a move in that direction. Also, in the US, there's a push now for a carbon tax. So yeah.
First questions are coming in. Who are the experts? Is a question experts in hydrogen or in other areas such as electrification also?
It is experts within hydrogen related to utility sector, shipping, you name it. It's a lot of different experts.
Some broad, some more specialized.
Some from the university professors, some from business side, and some from international organizations.
A question by Anders Östergaard, maybe a bit technical, but will hydrogen as a petrol replacer be more competitive than liquid fuels made from electric energy?
Well, this is really, if you look at it from a light duty vehicle point of view, no. But hydrogen could be used for heavy duty vehicles, but then it would be made from wind, typically.
That's basically the idea for green hydrogen, excess wind wind energy.
But you can also use turquoise hydrogen. You can use, there's different ways you can do this. But the main focus at this point is green hydrogen. So from wind energy and solar.
Yeah, when we talked before we got into the studio, you explained to me the sheer size of the problem. Actually, could you just tell the listeners?
People don't realize that we talk about hydrogen as this. Sometimes it's framed kind of like a silver bullet. But what is very important to realize is that for hydrogen to come into fruition, you need vast amounts of renewable energy supply. So just if you imagine the hydrogen market as it is today, the volumes, if we were to create those volumes using green hydrogen, using wind energy or solar, we would need to replace the entire electricity production in Europe today with windmills or solar energy. So that's definitely an issue here. We're talking about having a major transition where we need a lot of wind power, we need a lot of solar energy. So there's a volume issue here, which is massive.
Yeah. We're halfway through our time, so let's get to the second issue here. Transport and storage of hydrogen is, of course, also a crucial matter. Pretty hard to transport, pretty hard to store.
Yeah, it's back to what we discussed before. I think in terms of transportation, it's again, you need to remember that hydrogen is elusive. It gets into every crack and corner. So you really want it to be safe. And there's ways you can do that. You can transport it by converting it into ammonia, which is much easier to transport. Ammonia is poisonous, but still this is a technology that we have. But there's always, whenever you convert it, there's a conversion loss. And in hydrogen, that's quite big. So the question is, does it make sense to convert it and transport it? And this will very much be a pricing issue, right? So if you want to transport it and you want to convert it, prices really need to be very low. And then there's the storage issue, which means that you need to have the storage facilities and you need the production. So you need production, storage, and then there's the distribution. And the distribution at this point can go either, today we're primarily trucking, but future we can maybe see that we will be shipping hydrogen. But here there is some disagreement among the experts. Most people agree that it will be regional. It will not be transatlantic, but it will be within regional settings. And here you can also see piping of hydrogen, and that would probably begin with piping hydrogen from areas where you had, let's say, you would have a lot of wind energy in an area, and you would pipe that to areas where you would have an industrial cluster that would need that energy, because piping is just a huge capex cost.
Yeah. I saw in the study there was a certain distance mentioned, it was 1,500 kilometers. Well,
and basically it's that if you don't want to transport hydrogen to across the world. You basically just want it to be within what makes economic sense. So it should not be transatlantic. It should be maybe from, as we discussed, it should be Denmark to Germany, or from France. Macron is focusing now on using nuclear energy for producing hydrogen. So it could be from France to Germany or whatever.
Experts were in agreement over that Europe is far ahead.
Yeah.
On this topic.
Yeah, and it's I think at the moment we should not forget about the US. We should definitely not forget about China, no India for that matter, because especially China, when they have a mind to it, we saw that with solar energy, they have a capacity to go in and they can really decrease cost by scaling up very fast. We still saw that with solar energy, where the US, Germany was very advanced, and China went in with huge investment, and they brought down cost and outcompeted many of the European and American producers. So China should not be forgotten in this context.
But that would be good if they went in.
Well, basically, it's we have a tendency to think that, well, if we invest in something, like a small country in Denmark, we're 0.5% of global emissions. So if Denmark were to invest in something, the best thing we can hope for is a major coming in, taking the technology and scaling it, because that would have the biggest effect on climate change.
If prices are driven down,
Yeah.
and we can all invest in it and buy the stuff.
Basically, that's what happened with wind energy, right? It started out. Denmark was a huge factor in pushing for wind energy, but we cannot necessarily expect that we will be the ones who will drive this. It will probably be driven by major industries in major countries.
There is a question talking about hydrogen. You might also need more really clean water. Is this regarded? This is energy intensive as well.
No, we have not. We have actually asked the question if access to water is an issue, and it was considered not to be a major issue.
So let's go over to the third topic here. The question as to when green hydrogen will become competitive. What are the experts saying?
That question really needs to be broken down to what kind of area we're looking at. So I think the first thing the experts focus on is the use of hydrogen in chemistry, chemical and fertilizer. So this would be one of the first areas where we would see hydrogen really come into to play. Another area we would see would be the maritime industry. We're already seeing that they're very much focused, like Maersk is focused on decarbonizing and have considered different ways to do that. So another area would be maritime industry, simply because it's very hard for the maritime industry to decarbonize in other ways. They wouldn't be able to electrify. So they can either use biofuels or hydrogen. And another area we would see is heavy duty transport, so lorries and trucks. So these would be the first that we would see probably in the next 10 years. Then later we would see potentially steel and other areas like aviation coming in maybe in 2040. And when asked about something like heating, you can also use hydrogen for pure heating. And there were some degree of some degree of some disagreement, but the majority felt that that hydrogen is a high value product, so you simply don't want to burn it. You want to use it for something. I mean, you can heat in different ways that would make more sense from a decarbonization point of view. So as a high value product, you would not burn hydrogen. But the thing is that you can mix hydrogen. So instead of having pure hydrogen, you can mix it into the stream, and that would kind of be a market creating mechanism by simply saying, well, you will need a certain amount of hydrogen in the gas stream. So it's not a either or. You could use it, but from a pure heating perspective, it's too expensive.
We looked at, have the experts looked at cars? Is the hydrogen powered car dead?
Yeah,
it is.
It's
as easy as that.
Well, you never know. There are a lot of people that are saying that that hydrogen cars have some advantages, and will prices come down, it will actually be better than EVs for a number of reasons. However, we need to also consider that EVs, in the next couple of years, there will be a massive increase in the amount of people that will buy EVs. So production costs will go down. Hydrogen will need to compete with that. So from my perspective, and for the majority of the experts, their opinion is that that race is probably gone instead. But there could be some areas where, I mean, local reasons it's different. Like in Pakistan today, they're driving around in gas vehicles, right? So it's yeah.
Okay, I think German car producers would agree with that. Yeah. There's one question from Henrik Adler Nielsen. Why are we only talking methanol and ammonia regarding the shipping industry and pure hydrogen for industrial purpose? Isn't it beneficial to make methanol or ammonia for industrial purposes?
Yeah, well, it is.
I think you touched upon that.
Yeah, and we're not talking about only that. But I think that's the reason why we are, because the reason why we are focusing so much on it for the shipping purposes is because shipping don't really have anywhere to go, more or less, for a substitute fuel. So I think this is why it's been talked about a lot. So it's not that is forgotten at all.
We're through with our three topics and have 5 minutes left, and we agreed that we could also talk about energy prices on a broader basis a bit. Everybody's worried about energy prices. The price of gas and of electricity have both been going up. What do you see when you look into your crystal ball in the short, medium, long-term future for energy prices?
I think first, if you look at any commodity, and when you see when you say the inventories are low, then you typically have higher prices. So
happening now.
Yeah.
Inventories are low.
You've had a tough winter, and so inventories were low. But what has exacerbated that is the fact that you have had demand from China, which has increased substantially on LNG. So together with low inventories and a high demand, you get a classical price increase. So I think it's nothing. It's not that unusual. It's unusual, but it's something that we see sometimes. I think what is maybe more of interest is that those are the primary factors. The secondary factors, which also play a role, is the fact that we in Europe we've seen low production of electricity from water, like in Norway, and we have seen a low degree of wind energy. So those two problems could begin a discussion about the problem of available energy, renewable energy as a variable source, because you would need a base load and something like gas to offset that. And so those discussions could somehow continue into the future. How do we actually increase the amount of renewables and create supply security at the same time? So I think what we've seen now, well, those prices will decrease after winter, and everything will slowly go back to normal. The discussion is really about how will we manage this transition, this great transition that we're seeing in the future. And this is a discussion that needs to be had.
You said the word supply crunch when we talked earlier.
Yeah, I think especially if now we're seeing that very much. We're seeing it in natural gas prices increasing, but we're also seeing that in oil. And I think if you look at, February from the IEA had been asking for investment into oil for God knows how long. Always asking for more investment because investment has not been forthcoming. So the problem we're facing now is people still need oil, and we are transitioning so away from oil, and more pension funds and investors are moving away from oil. So investments are not as forthcoming as they were once, and even back then people were screaming for investment. So the lack of investment that we're seeing, and a continuous demand, that might create a situation, probably will create situations where we will see volatility before we see lower for longer, as we've been discussing for a while. You will see some volatility in the market before we get there.
Okay. It is 9 o'clock, but we have another question that came in, and we're going back to hydrogen. There are from Steen Magnusson, there are private companies with $1 billion value who today produce and sell hydrogen products. Aren't you a bit too negative regarding the commercial value of hydrogen here and now?
Well, it is. Yeah, they're making business, but they need to convert that into green hydrogen, right? So it's not the production of hydrogen per se. It is how do we convert that production of hydrogen that we have today to green hydrogen, and do that in a way that make sense for the economy, and again makes sense in terms of where should we invest to get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of reducing carbon.
And that is, of course, very important. Getting the biggest bang for the buck means maintaining living standards while reducing the carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Martin, for joining us today and shedding some light on green hydrogen and the development over the next 20 years. Well, thank you to you all for tuning in and watching us here this morning. I wish you all a wonderful Friday and a good weekend. Thank you.